A lowly Omega healer reached for the wounded Alpha and whispered, "I can fix this," leaving him frozen. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to Alara Hayes. The night settled over Silverpine Forest like a soft veil, dimming the world into muted blues and drifting mist as Alara walked the narrow trail, with her gathering basket pressed close to her chest. Her breath formed little clouds in the cool air, but what slowed her steps wasn't the temperature. It was the weight of the day, the whispered comments, the dismissive glances that clung to her like burrs. A lowly Omega healer, the kind others tolerated only when they needed herbs or bandages, she had grown used to blending into the background. But tonight felt different, heavier somehow, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. A distant rustle made her pause. She lifted her head, listening the way only a healer accustomed to quiet could. At first she thought it was the wind moving through the branches. Then she heard it, soft, uneven breathing, strained in a way that tugged instinctively at her training. Something, or someone, was hurting. Her heartbeat fluttered as she followed the sound off the trail, her shoes pressing gently into the underbrush. The mist thinned just enough for her to see a shape slumped near the base of a fallen tree. A man, broad-shouldered, still as stone except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Moonlight brushed over him, revealing dark clothing torn at the edge, his skin pale beneath streaks of dirt. There was no sign of threat in the air, only exhaustion and the kind of quiet pain that whispered instead of screamed. Alara moved closer, careful not to startle him. "Sir," she breathed, her voice barely rising above the rustle of leaves. No response. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling slightly as she reached out. This close, she could feel the warmth of his skin, the unevenness of his breath, the faint tension that suggested he was conscious enough to sense her presence. Her instincts stirred, gentle, steady, the way they always did when someone needed care. She swallowed, leaning in as she spoke softly, almost like a promise meant only for him. "I can fix this." The instant her fingers grazed his forearm, his breathing hitched, not in fear, but in something closer to surprise. His eyes opened, pale and sharp even in the dim light, meeting hers with an expression that froze the world for a heartbeat. He didn't speak. He simply stared, as if her touch had broken through a fog he couldn't escape. Alara felt her own breath catch, not from fear but from the strange pull in the air between them, quiet and undeniable. And in that suspended moment, the forest felt impossibly still, waiting for what would happen next. Alara's breath trembled as the stranger's eyes focused on her, sharp beneath the dim moonlight, as if he were trying to understand how someone like her had found him in a forest this deep and quiet. She gently drew her hand back to give him space, but the echo of that brief touch lingered, warm against her palm. His breathing settled, still shallow but steadier than before. She kept her voice low and steady, the way she always did when trying to soothe frightened animals or anxious pack members. "You do not have to sit up yet," she murmured. "Your body is exhausted. Just breathe slowly." His gaze flickered downward, as if checking whether he could move, but he stayed still. Alara reached for her basket and pulled it closer. The herbs inside were meager after the long day, but she sifted through them with practiced hands, choosing what would help reduce strain and ease his discomfort. The forest breeze brushed through the clearing, carrying the scent of pine and damp soil, settling her nerves. She crushed a handful of leaves between her fingers, releasing a mild, calming fragrance. When she turned back to him, he was watching her movements closely, not with suspicion, but with an intensity that made her pulse flutter. She offered him the mixture, cupping it gently in both hands. "This is safe," she assured him. "Just breathe it in. It will help you feel less overwhelmed." His eyes softened for the briefest moment, and he leaned slightly toward her hands. The shift was small, almost imperceptible, but Alara recognized trust when she saw it. He breathed in, the tension across his shoulders easing little by little. A quiet sigh left him, and his eyes closed as if the relief surprised him. Alara let herself exhale too, grateful her instincts had not failed her. Most people in the pack dismissed her healing ability as weak, but moments like this reminded her why she kept trying anyway. She glanced around the clearing, ensuring they were alone. The forest was peaceful, the moon hanging above like a quiet guardian. Nothing moved except the slow rise and fall of his chest. After a long moment, his voice emerged, low and slightly rough, as though unused. "Why did you help me?" She startled slightly at the sound. She had not been sure he would speak at all. "Because you needed someone," she answered softly. "And because I could." He opened his eyes again, meeting her gaze directly this time. There was something searching in his expression, something that made her want to look away yet rooted her in place. "Most people would have walked past," he said. "Most people would have been afraid." Alara swallowed, feeling the weight of his words settle around them. "Fear and compassion can exist in the same person," she whispered. "I was afraid, but I could not leave you here." For a heartbeat he said nothing, simply studying her, as if she were the unexpected part of a world he thought he already understood. A faint breeze moved through the clearing, lifting a strand of her hair, and she tucked it behind her ear without breaking eye contact. His voice softened. "You are not what I expected." She offered a small, nervous smile, unsure how else to respond. "I hear that a lot." The corner of his mouth shifted, not quite a smile, but something close. As he settled back against the fallen tree, the moonlight caught in his pale eyes, turning them into reflective silver. Alara felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest, a sensing that tonight was the beginning of something she could not yet name, but already felt unfolding, gentle as a breath in the stillness. The clearing felt warmer now, as if the forest itself sensed the fragile connection forming between them. Alara stayed close enough that he could see her if he needed reassurance, but far enough to give him space while his strength slowly returned. The man's breathing had evened out, the unsteady rhythm smoothing into something calmer, though fatigue still weighed heavily across his features. She watched him quietly, letting the silence settle in a gentle way, not the tense kind that invited worry. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "Do you feel any dizziness?" He blinked once, considering the question. "A little," he admitted, "but nothing like before." Alara nodded in relief. "That is normal. The forest air and the herbs are helping you recover. Your body just needs a moment to catch up." He looked up at the sky for a brief second, as though grounding himself in the steady glow of the moon before returning his attention to her. "How did you learn to do that?" She hesitated. Most people in her pack never asked about her healing abilities. They either took them for granted or overlooked them entirely. "I was taught by an older healer," she said carefully. "She showed me how to listen before trying to fix anything. Not everyone needs the same kind of help." His gaze remained steady on her, thoughtful. "You listen differently than others." The words landed unexpectedly, brushing warmth across her chest. "I just try not to assume," Alara murmured. "People are more than what they appear." He seemed to absorb that, the corner of his brow lifting slightly as if her answer was something he had not expected to hear. A faint breeze rustled through the branches, and Alara glanced toward the path where the trees grew thicker. She knew she needed to guide him out of the forest before the mist deepened. "If you can stand," she said gently, "I can help you reach safer ground. There is a ridge not far from here that overlooks the trail. You will be able to rest there more comfortably." He shifted slightly, testing his weight. The attempt made his expression tighten with discomfort, though not pain severe enough to alarm her. Alara instinctively moved closer, offering her arm. "Take your time," she encouraged. "There is no rush." He hesitated before accepting her support, his fingers curling around her forearm with more care than strength. Even so, his touch carried a surprising steadiness, as though he did not want to risk overwhelming her. Slowly, he pushed himself upright. The movement brought him closer to her height, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him despite the cool night air. Alara kept her focus steady, guiding him step by step until he could lean back against the fallen tree for balance. "You are doing well," she said softly. "Just breathe. The dizziness will pass." His eyes flicked to her again, the silver in them reflecting the moonlight. "You do not speak to me like I am fragile." The statement caught her off guard, and she felt a shy smile tug at her lips. "You are not fragile," she said. "You are simply tired." Something unspoken moved behind his expression, a quiet recognition she did not understand yet, but felt all the same. When he finally spoke again, his voice was lower, calmer. "I am glad you found me." The words settled between them like a warm ember, subtle but bright. Alara felt her heartbeat stir in response, steady yet full, as the night deepened around them, and the world seemed to narrow to the soft rhythm of two breaths finding their balance together. Alara steadied her footing as the man leaned against the fallen tree, the moonlight brushing over his features in a way that made the moment feel suspended between breath and stillness. The night was quiet except for the faint rustle of forest leaves, and in that gentle hush, she became aware of how close they stood. His posture was still weary, but there was a steadiness in his gaze that had not been there earlier. She adjusted her stance to offer better support should he need it, though she tried not to appear as if she expected him to falter. Her voice came softer than the breeze. "If the ridge is too far, we can rest here a little longer." He considered this, his attention shifting from her face to the forest path and back again. "I can try," he said, the determination in his tone quiet but unmistakable. With a small nod, she stepped closer, her hand hovering near his arm. "Hold on to me only if you need to," she said. "Let your balance guide you first." There was a brief pause before he placed his hand lightly against her forearm, his touch warm but cautious. Together they took a slow step forward. The earth beneath them was soft from the evening dew, and Alara adjusted her pace. So he did not feel hurried. His breathing shifted with each movement, still controlled but slightly deeper than before. As they walked, the forest seemed to guide them, the branches parting just enough for moonlight to spill over their path. Alara listened for any signs of strain in his breath or footsteps. She knew that healing was not always immediate, and that the body often needed time before strength returned. "You are doing better than most would in your condition," she said quietly. "Your awareness is sharper now." He glanced down at her, the faintest trace of curiosity in his eyes. "You speak as if you have seen many people like me." She gave a small, thoughtful smile. "I have seen many forms of exhaustion," she said. "People trying to push themselves farther than they should. People holding on to strength they think they have lost. You remind me of someone who has carried responsibility for so long that resting feels unfamiliar." The words hung between them, gentle but honest. Something in his expression softened, as if she had touched on a truth he rarely allowed anyone to see. "Resting is not something I do often," he admitted. "Then start with small steps," she said. "Even a moment like this can help." They continued walking until the ridge came into view. It was a modest rise overlooking the winding forest trail, framed by tall pines that swayed lightly in the breeze. The view was peaceful, open enough to feel safe, yet tucked enough to still feel hidden. She guided him toward a broad patch of level ground where the earth was dry and covered in soft pine needles. "Sit here," she encouraged. "The air is clearer, and you can breathe without strain." He eased himself down slowly, his movements still deliberate but far more stable than before. Once settled, he looked up at her, gratitude flickering across his features in a quiet, unspoken way. Alara lowered herself to sit a short distance away, giving him space while still remaining close enough to help. For a moment, they simply existed in the calm of the ridge, the moon above them steady and bright. Then, with a voice gentler than the night wind, he said, "You stayed when you could have walked away." Alara folded her hands in her lap, her heart softening at the sincerity in his tone. "Everyone deserves someone who stays," she replied, "even if only for one night in the forest." His eyes lingered on her for a long breath, reflective and warm, as if he were trying to understand the kind of kindness she offered so freely. And under the glow of the moon, the quiet connection between them settled deeper, steady as the night around them. The ridge held a soft stillness, the kind that made every sound feel closer and every breath feel shared. Alara stayed seated near him, her hands resting lightly in her lap as the moon drifted lazily above the treetops. The man's breathing had become calmer, steadier, as though the forest air was finally beginning to ease the weight he carried. She watched him with a quiet attentiveness, not wanting to disturb whatever thoughts were settling behind his pale eyes. He shifted slightly, adjusting the way he sat, and glanced at her with a subtle curiosity. "You navigate this forest as if you know every inch of it," he said. "Most people avoid wandering this far after dark." Alara let out a gentle breath, her smile faint but warm. "I have always found comfort here." The trails feel familiar, almost friendly. They listen better than people do. His eyes lingered on her a moment longer, studying the way she spoke as if searching for the meaning beneath her words. "You are different from the pack you come from," he said. It was not a question. She lowered her gaze, brushing a thumb across her palm. "Not everyone sees value in someone whose strengths are quiet." He tilted his head slightly. "And you accept that?" "Accepting is easier than fighting," she murmured. "At least for now." He watched her closely, the moonlight catching the soft lines of her expression. "You should not have to shrink to make others comfortable." The words were simple, but they settled deep, stirring something in her chest she had not named in a long time. She did not reply right away, and the silence that followed was gentle rather than heavy. After a moment, she reached into her basket again and pulled out a small cloth pouch. "This will help with clarity," she said, offering it to him. "You can place it near your face and breathe naturally. The herbs inside support recovery." He accepted the pouch carefully, as though acknowledging both the gift and the care. "Behind it, you have a rare steadiness," he said. "It is not just healing. It is something deeper." Alara felt warmth rise to her cheeks, but she focused on the forest ahead instead of meeting his gaze directly. "I only do what I can," she whispered. "What feels right?" "That is exactly what makes it rare," he replied quietly. She tucked her knees closer to her chest and looked out over the ridge. The view unfolded in layers of soft silver and gentle shadows. "If you are comfortable staying here for a few minutes," she said, "your body might adjust even more. Sometimes the stillness helps the mind settle." He leaned back against a smooth patch of bark and nodded. "I can stay." The way he said it carried something unspoken, as if being here was not merely necessary, but unexpectedly welcome. As the minutes slipped by, she noticed the tension easing out of his posture, the heaviness around his shoulders releasing bit by bit. Even the way he breathed seemed to match the slow, steady rhythm of the forest around them. Eventually, he turned his head toward her again, his gaze softer than before. "What is your name?" She blinked, surprised that he had not asked sooner. "Alara Hayes," she answered. A faint calm traced over his features, almost like recognition, though she could not understand why. He nodded slowly, repeating her name with care. "Alara." Hearing it in his voice felt strangely grounding, as if her name had suddenly become part of something larger than the quiet forest night. And as they sat together on the ridge, wrapped in moonlight and silence, the feeling that their paths were never meant to be separate settled deeper, steady as the breath they shared or the gentle sweep of wind across the trees. Alara felt the quiet weight of the night settle deeper around them as her name lingered in the air. The man repeated it once more under his breath, almost as if testing how it felt to say, and something about the softness in his tone made her heart lift in a gentle, unexpected way. She studied him in the moonlight, noticing how the earlier strain in his expression had eased. His posture was still carrying fatigue, but not the same sharp exhaustion she had first found him with. Now it felt more like someone finally letting himself slow down after pushing too hard for too long. He held the small herb pouch she had given him, turning it in his hands with a quiet appreciation that did not need to be spoken. After a moment of peaceful silence, he looked at her again. "You walk these woods often?" She nodded, tracing a small line in the pine needles beside her. "It has always been easier to breathe out here. The village can feel crowded, even when it is not." His brow lifted slightly. "Crowded?" She hesitated. "Not with people. With expectations." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "Do they expect too much from you, or too little?" "Too little," she said softly. "They see an Omega healer who should stay quiet and follow rules without question. Some days it feels like I am only visible when someone needs medicine." He studied her with a focus that felt almost careful. "But you do more than that. You listen. You notice what others miss. That is not something small." Alara felt warmth rise in her chest, gentle but steady. The way he spoke made it sound like her quiet nature had value, not weakness. She glanced up at him, surprised by the sincerity in his gaze. "Most people do not say things like that," she whispered. "Most people do not see it." "Maybe they are not looking closely enough," he replied. A soft breeze stirred the branches above them, scattering faint specks of moonlit pollen through the air. Alara let the quiet fill the space between them again, but it was a comfortable quiet, one that felt shared rather than empty. After a few breaths, She noticed a faint shift in the rhythm of his breathing. It was deeper now, more grounded. Whatever had happened to him earlier that evening, his body was slowly finding its balance again. "How do you feel now?" she asked gently. He tested his movement, lifting his shoulders slightly before relaxing them again. "Better," he said. "Clearer. The fog in my mind has lifted." "That is good," she murmured, a small relief slipping into her voice. "Your system is adjusting. That means you are recovering more quickly than I expected." He tilted his head as though reassessing her entirely. "You speak like someone who has trained far beyond her rank." She blinked at that. No one had ever said such a thing to her. "I only learned what I needed to help people," she said. "No one ever asked for more." "They should have," he said quietly. His tone was not forceful, but it carried a certainty that wrapped around her like a steady hand. Alara lowered her gaze, unsure how to absorb the unexpected confidence he had in her. Before she could respond, he shifted slightly, his voice dropping to something gentler than before. "Alara, what you did for me tonight, most would not have stopped. You did not just help me. You chose to stay." She swallowed, her voice small but honest. It felt like the right thing. A long breath escaped him, more like a release than exhaustion. "I have not felt that kind of rightness in a long time." She looked up then, meeting his eyes fully. In them she saw something she did not expect, a quiet admiration, subtle but unmistakably real, and something else she could not yet name but felt all the way to her chest. The night air pressed softly around them, and for the first time since she found him, Alara sensed that the moment was shifting, deepening, becoming something neither of them had prepared for, but both of them recognized the instant it arrived. The moment deepened in the quiet stillness of the ridge, the air holding a soft charge that made Alara more aware of her own heartbeat than she expected. The man sat a little straighter now, his strength returning in subtle ways, though the exhaustion still lingered at the edges of his expression. When he spoke again, there was a gentleness in his voice that had not been there before. "You did not ask for my name," he said softly. Alara looked up, surprised. She had been so focused on helping him breathe easier, move easier, exist easier, that she had not realized she never asked. "I wanted you to offer it when you felt ready," she said. "Some people guard their names when they are uncertain." A faint warmth touched his expression, something almost like appreciation. "My name is Cade," he said. "Cade Thornwell." She repeated it quietly to be sure she heard it correctly. Cade. The name felt strong, grounded, fitting the steady presence he carried even in his weakened state. Something in the way he watched her suggested he was waiting for her reaction, though she could not guess why. She simply nodded, a small smile forming. "It suits you." His shoulders eased, just slightly, as if her simple acceptance mattered more than it should have. For a few moments they sat in silence again, listening to the wind move through the pine branches above. The moon continued its slow climb, leaving soft silver patterns across the ridge. Alara folded her hands loosely in her lap and glanced at him. "When the sun rises, there is a small settlement not far from here. If you need shelter or guidance, I can help you reach it." Cade studied her, his gaze thoughtful. "You would walk with a stranger that far?" She nodded. "You are not a threat, and you should not travel alone until you are fully steady on your feet." His expression shifted, a subtle shadow crossing his features, the kind that hinted at things unspoken. "I am not always considered safe company," he said quietly. She tilted her head, sensing there was more behind his words. "Everyone has moments when they feel difficult," she said gently. "But you have been nothing but respectful." His eyes held hers for a long breath, something unreadable stirring there. Then, in a voice barely louder than the breeze, he said, "Alara, if I asked you to trust me a little longer, would you?" Her breath caught slightly at the question, unexpected in its sincerity. "I think I already do," she admitted. Cade exhaled as though her words loosened something tightly held inside him. A soft calm settled over his features. "I want you to stay close," he said. "Not because I am unwell, but because it feels right." The honesty in his tone sent a quiet warmth through her. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, aware of the way her pulse softened in her chest. "Then I will stay," she said. "At least until you no longer need someone beside you." His gaze deepened, steady and warm. "I think I will need that longer than one night." Alara felt her breath catch again, not in alarm, but in the gentle certainty that something important had just shifted between them. The ridge held its peaceful silence, The forest listening as two lives, once strangers, drifted closer with each quiet moment shared under the moonlit sky. The night deepened around the ridge, wrapping Alara and Cade in a quiet stillness that felt almost fragile, as though the forest understood that something delicate was unfolding and chose to hold its breath for them. Cade remained seated against the smooth bark, his posture more relaxed now, but his eyes stayed on her with a focus that made her pulse slow and warm. She was not used to being looked at this way, not with expectation or judgment, but with an attentiveness that seemed to see past the layers she usually hid behind. Alara tucked her hands closer to her body, as if grounding herself. "You should rest a little more," she said gently. "Your body is still recovering." Cade nodded, but he did not close his eyes. "I will," he said softly, "but only if you stay where I can see you." The sincerity in his voice sent a calm warmth through her chest. She settled more comfortably against the ground, keeping a respectful distance while still remaining within reach should he need help. The forest breeze drifted between them, carrying the faint scent of pine and cool earth. For a while, neither spoke, and the silence was peaceful, like a familiar blanket laid over the night. Then Cade shifted slightly, his voice low. "Alara, may I ask you something?" She turned to him. "Of course. Have you always been alone in your kindness?" The question startled her more than she expected. She looked down at her hands, brushing a thumb across her palm in a thoughtful motion. "Kindness is easier when it does not ask for anything in return," she said quietly. "People expect strength to look loud, to take up space. Mine never has." Cade listened with a stillness that felt deliberate, giving her room to speak without pressure. "When you are an Omega healer," she continued, choosing her words carefully, "people see the service, not the person. They want what you can give, but they rarely ask if you are tired." Her voice softened even more. "So, I learned to stand alone. It is simpler that way." Cade's expression shifted, the shadows of the pines catching in his eyes. "You should not have had to learn that," he said. She lifted her gaze, and the concern in his expression made something inside her soften unexpectedly. "It taught me to be patient," she whispered. "It taught me to be observant. It also taught you to expect too little in return," he said. Quietly, "That is not patience. That is resignation." Alara inhaled slowly, the truth of his words settling deeper than she wished to admit. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe I just never found a reason to expect more." Cade's gaze held hers for a long, steady moment, something almost unspoken moving between them. Then his tone gentled further. "Alara, you deserve more." The simplicity of the statement sank into her like a warm tide. She felt her breath catch slightly, not from surprise, but from the quiet honesty in his voice. She looked down again, unsure how to accept such words, when she felt the ground subtly tremble beneath her hand. Cade noticed her reaction instantly. "What is it?" he asked, his posture straightening. Alara held up a hand for silence, listening. At first, the forest seemed unchanged. Then she heard it, a faint, rhythmic rustle, out of place with the natural movement of the trees. Her eyes widened slightly. "Someone is nearby." Cade did not move suddenly, but she felt a change in him, a quiet alertness rising beneath the calm she had tended so carefully. His voice dropped to a low murmur. "Alara, stay close." She shifted a little nearer without thinking, the instinct to trust him stronger now than the fear of the unknown sound. The forest remained still, but the sense of approaching presence lingered, subtle yet unmistakable. And in that charged quiet, Alara realized the night was no longer just about healing a stranger. Something larger was drawing near, shifting the edges of the moment with slow, steady inevitability. Alara kept perfectly still, her breath held lightly in her chest as the soft rustling continued somewhere beyond the ridge. It was faint, careful, almost testing the air rather than moving through it. Cade's posture changed beside her, not in a way that suggested panic, but with a controlled steadiness that felt instinctive, as if alertness lived beneath his skin even when he was worn thin. His voice, when it reached her, was low and calm. "Do you sense anything else?" She listened again, letting her focus spread through the quiet. The forest usually hummed with its own rhythm, branches shifting, small animals moving in the underbrush, but this sound carried intention, as though someone or something was pausing between each step. "It feels like someone is searching," she whispered. Not fast, not close yet, but moving with purpose. Cade nodded once, his expression thoughtful rather than alarmed. Then they are not wandering. They know where to look. Alara turned her head slightly toward him. Are they looking for you? His gaze remained on the trees, the silver in his eyes sharpened by the moonlight. Possibly, he said, or they could be passing through. But the timing is unlikely to be coincidence. Though uncertainty brushed her nerves, Alara found herself inching a little closer to him, drawn by a quiet trust that had formed long before she realized it. Cade noticed, but did not comment. Instead, he shifted so that he was angled protectively without restricting her space. If anyone reaches this ridge, he said gently, stay behind me. Not because you cannot handle yourself, but because I would rather someone see me before they see you. The sincerity in his tone left her chest warm. You do not have to shield me, she whispered. I choose to, he replied. The reply settled deeper than she expected, steadying her heartbeat instead of unsettling it. The rustling grew faint again, then paused entirely, leaving only the soft movement of wind through pine needles. Alara exhaled slowly. It stopped. Cade listened a moment longer before nodding. Whoever it was, they may have changed direction. But we should be cautious. She glanced at him, at the steadiness returning to his posture, and something unspoken rose in her chest. Cade, she said quietly, if there is something you need to tell me, you can. He hesitated. The pause was not fearful but contemplative, as if he were weighing the right moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a softness she had come to recognize as rare. Alara, I have not been entirely open with you. Not out of mistrust, but because tonight unfolded in ways I did not expect. Her heart fluttered with a mixture of curiosity and gentle concern. You do not need to tell me anything before you are ready. He shook his head slightly. You deserve honesty. His gaze met hers fully, the silver in his eyes steady and clear. I was not wandering the forest by accident. I was returning from something important, something I cannot explain yet. And I was not alone earlier. There were others nearby, but I was separated from them. Alara absorbed this quietly. Are they the ones who might be searching now? Perhaps, he said. But if they are, it means they are tracking my trail. They will find this ridge eventually. A soft breeze brushed her cheek, carrying the cool scent of pine and the distant whisper of nightfall settling deeper over the woods. Will they be kind to me? She asked softly. Cade's response came without hesitation, warm and firm. If they are mine, they will treat you with the respect you deserve. Her breath softened. And if they are not? Cade looked at her with a quiet certainty that eased the tension coiled in her spine. Then I will not let them near you. The promise was gentle, free of threat, grounded in a sincerity that felt steady as earth. The rustling did not return, leaving the ridge wrapped in silence once more. But something had shifted in the air between them, a quiet acknowledgement of trust that had grown deeper, steadier, stronger than either of them had expected. Alara settled closer, not touching him, but allowing the space between them to close just slightly. The moon hung high, casting a soft silver glow over the clearing, as if bearing witness to a truth slowly unfolding. Whatever tomorrow held, whatever footsteps drew nearer in the dark, she knew one thing with a certainty she did not need to name. Tonight had bound their paths together in a way neither of them could step away from now.